The New Norm is brought to you by Winning at Home. I'm Steve Norman. Welcome to The New Norm. I had an opportunity to be a part of a Bible study with some friends, and we were looking at Mark chapter 5. And it reads as follows. When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, this was back to the kind of home base side of the lake where Capernaum was, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of their synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. This is a picture of total desperation from a respectable leader in their community. He pleaded earnestly. He's begging Jesus, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she'll be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. And a large crowd followed and pressed around him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She'd suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. And when she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. And immediately her bleeding stopped. And she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. And at once Jesus realized that power had gone out from him, and he turned around to the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you," his disciples answered, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. And then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." And while Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" And overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, "Don't be afraid, just believe." And he did not let anyone follow him except for Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. And when they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. And he went in and said to them, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. And after he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him, and he went into where the child was. And he took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha koum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." And immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. And at this, they were completely astonished. And Jesus gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat. There's just so many different things that are happening in this passage. But it starts with the heart of a father. Jairus is like, "My daughter is in crisis. Will you come and help her?" And as they're making the trip, and you can imagine that Jairus is wanting Jesus to move at a quick pace with a high degree of urgency. Like the stakes are high and time is against them. But they have this moment where there's this interruption, and it's very fascinating because Jesus feels power leave his body when this troubled adult woman touches him. And I have no idea what that must look like. Sometimes I think of like the old-timey video games where if you had like battle damage, your power bar went down. And so somehow Jesus knew that in his divinity, Jesus knew that power had exited his body. And some people said, like, if Jesus was God, did he not know who touched him? But it sounds like he legitimately didn't. Maybe he allowed his divinity to be limited by his humanity and was legitimately curious. And so Jesus is looking around, waiting to see if the person who had touched him on purpose, touched him with the intent of being healed, would identify themselves. And it said that this woman, even though she knew she had been healed, came to Jesus trembling in fear because she had been exposed. Now think about this for a moment. The issue that the woman is struggling with would have made her ritually and ceremonially unclean. And as a result, her contact with other people in her community would have been limited. So she would have been ostracized from community events and community gatherings because of her condition. And so for her to touch anybody would have been unthinkable because she would, again, in that tradition, but it considered as contaminating them with her ritual uncleanness. So for her to touch a clean rabbi would have under ordinary circumstances, put him at risk of having to put his entire ministry on pause because he would have been, in air quotes, contaminated by her condition. So some people think that the only way that she could have gotten close enough to Jesus to touch him would have been under the cover, the anonymity of being a part of a crowd left him. So think about that. She's swept up in this crowd. She's trying to keep a low profile. In fact, we can almost see her hunching down because she decides to touch not his shoulder, not his hand, but the edge of his garment. Maybe she's trying to keep as much distance as she can so that he won't be polluted by her ceremonial uncleanliness. And so she just touches the edge of his cloak. And I love it because she's trying to stay under the radar. She's trying to see if she can get healed without anybody noticing. But I love it that even in her attempt to remain private, Jesus makes her healing public. He compels her to publicly identify herself. Now, so the question is like, why? Why doesn't Jesus just honor her desire to be anonymous? One theory is that the law of Moses, the Torah would have said that if you had a condition like hers and you needed to be declared ceremonially or ritually clean, you would have to go to the priest. The priest would examine you, determine that your condition had ceased and you were now clean. And so in order for her to be restored to community relationships, restored to her family, restored to her friends, restored to any semblance of participation in the broader community context, she had to be publicly declared clean. So I find it fascinating that Jesus decides to name her. He calls her out publicly so that he can declare her clean in front of everybody. And so this woman who had been considered unclean, this woman who had been ostracized, this woman who had been called outcast, what is the first word that Jesus uses to describe her? He calls her daughter. So he says to everybody, I see her, she belongs to me. And then he says to her, your faith has healed you. You are clean now. And then he says, go in peace, leave this place whole, shalom, go in wholeness, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. He goes, and be freed from your suffering. So Jesus loves her enough, not just to restore her physically, privately, but to restore her spiritually and relationally, and to do that publicly. So we have this kind of interesting compare and contrast moment. If Jesus wants to make sure that her healing is public, why does he try to make sure that what happened to Jairus' daughter is so private? I have a theory about that I'll share in a second. But first of all, listen to this statement. I find it fascinating that when they finally get to the home of the synagogue leader, it says that Jesus saw a commotion and people crying and wailing outside. And when he tells them that they don't have to wail, that the child is not dead, I mean, she is dead, she's physically dead, but Jesus always refers to death as a temporary state for people that he's getting ready to resurrect. It says that they laughed at him. And I find that like personally amusing that people could go from wailing to laughing like laughing on a dime. And it makes you wonder, well, how sincere was their wailing if they can come out of it so quickly and start giggling? And my personal take is that in first century Palestine, there was a tradition in the community that there were professional wailers, that there were people who actually got monetarily compensated to create a scene, to wail publicly. And so one theory is that these people were paid wailers who broke character because they thought that what Jesus was saying was so absurd, or because there were people in the community who wanted to get on the good side of a person of status. They wanted Jairus to remember them as people who came alongside his family and showed deep empathy at their time of need. Maybe they're volunteer wailers who are just trying to make an impression on Jairus. And Jesus has zero tolerance for this nonsense. He's like, A, what you're doing is absurd. B, if you are trying to capitalize politically or financially on somebody else's grief, that's sick and twisted, and you have to leave the room. So I love it that Jesus has this very public moment in the crowd, but he has this very private moment with Jairus and his family and his daughter, and then the three of the disciples. So they leave the masses and they go into a private room with just the three family members, the daughter who's deceased and her parents, Jesus and three of his friends. So there's only 7 people. So we go from this mass to this tiny group. And Jesus says to her, little girl, get up. And she does, like in an instant. So in the first version, we have the woman who is reaching out to touch Jesus. And in the second instance, we have Jesus who is reaching out to touch the girl. And I love it that it says that Jesus gave them strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat. Now, as our group was talking about this, they're like, why is Jesus even attempting to keep this secret? Everybody's going to find out that this girl was raised from the dead. Like, they're not going to be able to keep this secret for very long. Why is there even the attempt to keep this quiet? In fact, somebody said, like, politically, Jesus has a lot to gain by making this as public as he could. Why keep this on the down low? Why keep this under the radar? My take is this. If Jesus restored the woman earlier in this scene publicly so that he could restore her dignity in front of the entire town, is it possible that Jesus heals Jairus' daughter quietly so that he could protect her dignity as well? It says that she's 12 years old, which would have been the age in ancient Jewish tradition, even modern Jewish tradition in some circles, where a young girl becomes a woman. And could it be that Jesus, as this girl enters from childhood into adulthood, that he doesn't want her entire identity, her entire reputation, or all of her notoriety to come from the fact that she was that kid that Jesus raised from the dead? And maybe he doesn't want her to be considered a freak. He doesn't want her to be a sideshow attraction. He just wants her to be a 12-year-old girl, like a 6th or 7th grade girl who is trying to grow up and experience life and have fun with her friends. Wise parents these days try to protect their kids from notoriety or attention from strangers, either in real life or online. And could it be that Jesus is trying to protect her psychological, relational, and mental well-being by protecting her from all of the attention, unwanted attention, that would come from the fame that she would get as that little girl in that one small town that Jesus raised from the dead? And so maybe Jesus is trying to protect her dignity, her honor, her well-being, her innocence in this moment as well. I think that kind of a sidebar encouragement from the story is, like, as a dad who has 3 daughters who are this summer going to be 21, the other one's already 19, the youngest who is 15, to be able to say, like, Jesus cares about them. He cares about their development. He cares about their well-being. He wants to protect them from the wrong kinds of attention and notoriety. And he wants to nurture a safe environment where they can grow up into all that they are intended to be, in the comfort and the privacy and the protection of their home and the eyes of a God who deeply loves them. So I don't know which of these characters you need to resonate with today. Maybe you're the woman who's been plagued by an ailment, physical, mental, spiritual, for 12 years. And you hit a point of desperation. And you're reaching out to touch the hem of his garment, saying, like, Lord, I need to be healed. I need the pain to stop. I need you to restore me. And keep praying that prayer. If God honored it for her, I have every reason to believe that he wants to do it for you. Or maybe you're like Jairus and you've got a real fear for the well-being of your child. You're like, God, I cannot help my 12-year-old, my 14-year-old, my 17-year-old in the circumstances that he or she are in. Will you intervene? Will you do the thing that only you can do? And I think that God can and will and does. And I love this last little detail of the passage. It says that he told his parents to give her something to eat. Like, Jesus is concerned about our well-being at every possible level. He doesn't just care about the life and death issues. He cares about our blood sugar, cares about our blood pressure, wants us to be safe and whole and well, and is constantly intervening to make that the case. So I love this story about the heart of a father who cares about his daughters, whether they're 12 or 22 or 39, and wants them to thrive. And maybe you need to hear God call you daughter today. Maybe you need to be reminded that he has the capacity to heal you, to send you away from a powerful encounter in peace and to be freed from your suffering. Or maybe you're a Jairus who's just absolutely paralyzed with terror, and you need to hear Jesus tell you what he told him, which is, don't be afraid. Just believe. Don't be afraid. Just believe. What does it look like for you today to stop leaning into fear and start leaning into belief? The New Norm is produced and distributed by Winning at Home. Winning at Home is a faith-based nonprofit committed to making individuals, couples, families, and businesses stronger through counseling and coaching. For more information, or if you want to support our ministry with your financial giving, you can visit winningathome.com. I'm your host, Steve Norman. Thanks for listening.